Today on Matt Walsh Show, some of us have been arguing for years that ADHD is a fake disease. We've been shouted down and defamed as science deniers, but now these so-called experts who sold this fraud to the public are coming out and admitting that we were right all along. We'll discuss. Also, the president of El Salvador visits the White House. Cory Booker embarrasses himself on camera again. And the media celebrates the historic space flight of an all-female crew. The only problem is that it was not historic at all. We'll talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. While many fitness influencers offer minimal value at premium prices, Fitbod provides comprehensive workout planning and tracking tools designed to help you maintain consistency and achieve real progress. Their expert-certified personal trainers have fine-tuned their approach to deliver proven exercise science and industry best practices directly to you. Plus, you can transform your fitness journey with over 1,000 demonstration videos to perfect your form and your technique. My producer, Holly, has been using Fitbod and has noticed significant improvements in both strength and endurance. The app's recovery tracking prevents overtraining of muscle groups, helping maintain consistent progress. She loves that it introduces new exercises progressively, teaching proper form for various movements through their detailed demonstrations. Plus, within seconds, Fitbod can create a personalized workout based on your goals and available equipment. The app also notices which muscle groups you've been hitting harder, so it automatically adjusts to focus on other muscle groups that are fresh and ready for action. You can keep your fitness routine engaging because the app continuously introduces variety through new exercises, rep patterns, innovative supersets, and challenging circuits, eliminating workout monotony for good. Level up your workout. Join Fitbod today to get your personalized workout plan. Get 25% off your subscription or try the app free for 7 days at fitbod.me/Walsh. That's fitbod.me/Walsh. At the risk of angering all the people who will scream from the rooftops that correlation doesn't equal causation like it's some kind of scriptural edict, here's some data that's worth considering. From 1980 to 2020, the share of male teachers in both elementary and middle schools declined from 40% to less than 20%. Men have mostly stopped teaching young children in school, and during this same period, as men have abandoned elementary schools, there's coincidentally been another major change in childhood education. Everyone's being diagnosed with ADHD. More than 21% of 14-year-old boys in this country now supposedly suffer from this condition. The number goes up to 23% for 17-year-old boys. And as a result, prescriptions for drugs like Ritalin and Adderall have skyrocketed. From 2012 to 2022, the total number of prescriptions for stimulants to treat ADHD increased dramatically by nearly 60%. And boys between the ages of 10 to 14 were the demographic that saw the highest increase in these prescriptions. Now, for decades, you've been instructed to believe that there's no significance to this correlation whatsoever. As women increasingly entered the workforce and replaced men in teaching jobs, we're not supposed to draw any conclusions about how the behavior of male children is now being addressed. The truth, we've been told, is not that a feminized education system has increasingly punished normal male behavior that it doesn't understand. It's not that schools have lost their capacity to educate male students. It's not that smartphone use and electronics in general have become distractions, which teachers have been unable to control. Instead, we've been led to believe that, in truth, boys have suddenly become afflicted with a severe and mysterious psychological disorder. There's no objective biologically based test for this disorder, nor can anyone point to a specific gene or pathogen that might cause it. But the scientific consensus for many years now has nevertheless been clear. ADHD, they've said again and again, is real. And the way to treat it is to give children speed in the form of drugs like Ritalin. Now, as I've said repeatedly all this time for well over a decade, the science behind the theory of ADHD isn't simply underbaked or inadequate. It is comically useless to the point that it is obviously fraudulent. The whole thing is a fraud. And to give just one of many examples, a few years ago, researchers at the University of Central Florida conducted a grand experiment where they put a child in front of a computer, and here's what it looked like. You could see it there. The researchers showed a child two separate videos. One of the videos was about mathematics, and it involved a teacher talking about basic addition, subtraction, and multiplication. The other video was the pod racing scene from Star Wars. And as you can see from the videos, the child became bored during the math lecture. He starts spinning in his chair and fidgeting. On the other hand, when the child is shown something more engaging, he suddenly stops fidgeting. He's actually paying attention to Star Wars. He was not paying attention to the math video. Now, unless you're an alien who's never interacted with a child and was never a child yourself, there is nothing remotely interesting or surprising about this footage. It's exactly what you would expect a normal, healthy child to do. But in the academic world, which exists to sell pharmaceuticals to children, this was a groundbreaking experiment. The footage was the basis for a peer-reviewed article in something called the Journal of Abnormal Child Psychology. Abnormal Child Psychology. And the University of Central Florida bragged about their findings with this headline: ADHD kids can be still if they're not straining their brains. Their conclusion was that ADHD is a nefarious disorder that's only triggered by cognitively demanding tasks, and that we need to be vigilant of ADHD whenever children have to use their brains in specific ways. Now, in reality, of course, the University of Central Florida had simply discovered the concept that is known as boredom. That's all they accomplished. The kid was bored of the math video because a math video is boring. Every person on the planet would also be bored by a math video. It would be like discovering that children prefer ice cream to broccoli and then announcing that you've identified a major new psychiatric disorder. It's exactly like doing a study to discover that children are more excited about opening presents on Christmas than they are about doing their chores. And then concluding that there must be some previously undetected mental illness that's infecting every child on the planet. Now multiply this garbage study by about 10 million and you get the sum and substance of ADHD research over the past few decades. None of it is legitimate. It is all nonsense. And as a result, we've all been waiting for the moment when, at long last, the medical establishment and mainstream media will finally acknowledge that none of this science is legitimate, because when that happens, millions of children will be spared these damaging and grossly unnecessary ADHD drugs. And this week, belatedly, that moment has started to arrive, it would seem. So, the New York Times Magazine has just published a very lengthy article entitled, quote, "Have we been thinking about ADHD all wrong?" Now, it's important to note at the outset that this article is not the result of some new discovery in the field of ADHD. There has not been any new groundbreaking research. Instead, the piece is a collection of existing studies about ADHD. Some of them are dating back more than a decade, along with testimony from researchers who in the past were some of the leading voices promoting ADHD medications. And now these researchers would like you to know that they've changed their minds, because after thinking about things for a while, they've realized that they were completely wrong. Oops, sorry about that. You all have your kids on speed for no reason. Our bad. Now, the article opens by discussing a researcher named James Swanson, who conducted a famous experiment in the 1990s that tracked three groups of students over a long period of time. One group of students received drugs for their alleged ADHD. Another group received behavioral training, and then a third group didn't receive any kind of treatment at all. After a little over a year, the study supposedly showed that the kids who received Ritalin were doing a lot better than any other group. And this study immediately became a major national news story. It was sold as proof that Ritalin works and that ADHD is real. Researchers like Swanson became highly paid consultants for the pharmaceutical industry, shilling ADHD drugs. So, everybody was happy. At least everybody who's making money off of this thing. And that is in spite of the fact that even if the drugs really did improve a child's behavior or academic performance, that obviously in and of itself does not prove that he has a disorder. Okay, steroids improve athletic performance. If you were to do a study with kids who took steroids and kids who didn't, you would find out that the kids who took steroids, well, what do you know? They're performing better in sports. But that doesn't mean that a child who lacks athletic skill is disordered. Okay, just because a drug enhances performance, that doesn't make it a legitimate medication. But it turns out that these drugs don't even do that much. As the New York Times now admits, the researchers understood very quickly that their narrative was false. Quote, as time passed, Swanson began to grow uneasy. He and his colleagues were continuing to follow the almost 600 children in the MTA study. And by the mid-2000s, they realized that the new data they were collecting was telling a different and less hopeful story than the one they initially reported. It was still true that after 14 months of treatment, the children taking Ritalin behaved better than those in other groups. But listen to this part. By 36 months, the advantage had faded completely, and children in every group, including the comparison group, displayed exactly the same level of symptoms. Swanson is now 80 and close to the end of his career, and when he talks about his life's work, he sounds troubled, not just about the MTA results, but about the state of the ADHD field in general. There are things about the way we do this work, he told me, that just are definitely wrong, close quote. So in other words, now that he's 80, this researcher who played a vital role in the mass prescribing of ADHD drugs has no problem going on the record and explaining that the so-called science on ADHD is essentially meaningless. You know, in the end, we're not correcting any kind of disorder in the brain. We're not providing a long-term solution to a medical problem. We're just giving children amphetamines, which have the predictable effect of artificially stimulating their brains so that they seem less bored, while introducing a whole host of catastrophic side effects that we'll discuss in a moment. And like all drug highs, eventually it stops working and reality sets in. The quote-unquote top scientists are all admitting this now. It's not just James Swanson who's recanting his old research on ADHD. For example, in 2017, a Dutch neuroscientist named Martine Hoogman announced that she had discovered evidence confirming that ADHD is a real observable disorder that's reflected in human biology. She stated at the time, quote, we confirm with high-powered analysis that patients with ADHD have altered brains. Therefore, ADHD is a disorder of the brain. That's what this researcher found with her high-powered analysis less than a decade ago. That was her statement. But now, this same scientist is admitting that her data showed something completely different. And so this is again from this week's Times article, quoting the reporter who wrote the story, quote, when I interviewed Hoogman by email recently, I was surprised to learn that she now wishes she could have revised that statement. Back then, we emphasized the differences that we found, although small, but you can also conclude that the subcortical and cortical volumes of people with ADHD and those without ADHD are almost identical, she wrote. In retrospect, she added, it was not fitting to conclude from her findings that ADHD is a brain disorder. The ADHD neurobiology is so much more complex than that, close quote. Okay, so here we have a leading expert who claimed in 2017 that her research proved that ADHD alters the brains. And now, via an email with a New York Times reporter, she casually admits that her research showed that the brains of people who are diagnosed with ADHD and the brains of everybody else are almost identical. Now, to call this a walk back would be a massive understatement. These people are completely abandoning everything they've been saying with absolute certainty for years now. And yet, their research is still being used by believers in ADHD to support the theory that ADHD is a real disease, even though the actual researchers themselves no longer stand by it. To be clear, it wasn't just this one scientist. Dozens of leading experts pushed the idea that ADHD is a symptom of observable physical issues in the brain. They even published a consensus statement claiming that a single gene caused ADHD and that ADHD patients had less brain matter and less electrical activity in their brains. None of that was actually true. When they ran experiments to prove that this was true, they got the opposite result, but they pretended otherwise at the time. And that's what this Dutch scientist is now admitting to. It's impossible to measure the full extent of the damage that's been done to millions of young children as a result of this fraud. Here's just one metric citing the MTA study, quote, children who took Ritalin for an extended period of time grew less quickly than the non-medicated children did. By the end of those 36 months, subjects who had consistently taken stimulant medication were on average more than an inch shorter than the ones who had never received medication. Many of the scientists in the MTA group assumed that this height suppression in childhood would be temporary, that these shorter children would catch up during adolescence. But when data was collected again, 9 years after the initial experiment, the height gap remained. Amphetamines can be powerfully addictive, and last year a study in the American Journal of Psychiatry found that even a medium-strength daily dose of Adderall more than tripled a patient's likelihood of developing psychosis or mania. So yes, we have drastically increased the risk of permanently destroying children's brains and bodies. We have given them drugs that are stunting their growth permanently, based entirely on junk science. And that's just what the New York Times is willing to admit right now. Give them another 20 years and they'll tell you all about the effects that amphetamines have on the heart as well. And all of this data already exists, of course. It's all out there. They're just refusing to tell you about it. Now, to be fair, there is one study that the Times cites that is actually recent. Here's the groundbreaking insight that the new MTA study has uncovered. Quote, last October, the MTA group published a new study that explored how ADHD symptoms in MTA participants changed over the course of their childhood and young adulthood. In contrast to the categorical model of ADHD, you either have it or you don't, the researchers showed that for most subjects, the symptoms and level of impairment in fact fluctuated over the years, often quite substantially. Only about 11% of the children who entered the study with an ADHD diagnosis experienced the symptoms consistently year after year. Close quote. This is something you don't need an MTA group or a controlled high-budget study to realize. Any parent could tell you this. Anybody with common sense can tell you this. On this show a few months ago, I said this exact thing in the context of the ADHD debate. Just to remind you, here's what I said at the time. And if I could get parents to understand one thing, it might be this. Nothing is permanent. Everything changes. And they go through phases. And those phases can be intense. They could last for 6 days or 6 years. But either way, they won't last forever. So just to give you one example of the dozens and dozens that I could supply from my own life and my family, my oldest daughter struggled to read, hated reading for many years. From the age of about 4, right around the time when you first start reading, to right around 11. Getting her to read was like pulling teeth. And she had a very hard time with it for a long time. She was, for a long time, way behind her peers. And yes, as parents, we worried about it. For all this stuff that I'm saying about, give it time, it's not easy to do. I understand that. And so as a parent, we're worried and we're fretting. And we can't help but imagine a dark future where our daughter is 25 years old and can barely read. Well, then one day it changed. And now at 11 and a half, we can't get her to stop reading. I mean, she reads like 2 whole chapter books a week. I'm talking books that are 300 pages. Now, everyone, whether they have children or not, intuitively understands that children go through phases. We don't need to administer psychoactive drugs every time they go through a phase we don't like. And we all know that it didn't really take decades for leading scientific experts to come to this conclusion. They knew it all along, but they had a financial incentive to say otherwise. Only now that the situation has devolved into total absurdity, now that we're supposed to pretend that 25% of teenagers suffer from this diagnosis, are some of these experts finally telling the truth. And they're also finally admitting that, in reality, the cure for ADHD is simply doing things that are interesting. That's it. It turns out that, according to the Times, ADHD patients suddenly lost their symptoms when they started doing things that they actually like doing. Quote, a hairstylist told the researchers that her inability to concentrate in school vanished when she began studying hair. A young man who was training to be an auto technician said that in his new career, his ADHD was no longer an issue. Patient symptoms tend to improve rather than worsen during times of higher environmental demands, periods of more responsibility and busier schedules. Jobs or college courses that were demanding and interesting helped alleviate their symptoms, and as their symptoms lifted, they changed the way they thought about themselves. Close quote. So again, we're talking about boredom. That's what all this is. People who are bored. Imagine that. It turns out that people become bored when you talk to them about something that isn't interesting. It turns out that when you sit kids down in a structured educational environment, especially boys, you sit them down in a classroom with 30 other kids for 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 9 months out of the year, and you have them do busy work, they're going to get bored and they're going to get fidgety. Wow. Amazing. What a revelation. But they become more engaged when you talk about things they find interesting. This is the cutting edge of the science on ADHD medication. They're figuring out things that anyone with 10 brain cells could have told you a long time ago, and something that a lot of us did say a long time ago. You know, as I've mentioned plenty of times, I have gone through this myself. I was a terrible student in school. I could have easily been diagnosed with ADHD if my parents wanted to go that route, which thankfully they didn't. But even though I couldn't complete a school assignment to save my life, now as an adult, I write the word count equivalent of like 2 or 3 chapters of a book every single week while preparing for this show. I also read all the time. I enjoy learning new things. I didn't when I was in school. What changed? What accounts for the change? Did my ADHD wear off? Well, no. For one thing, I grew older and became more mature and more disciplined. And for another thing, I enjoy what I'm doing now, and I'm interested in it. And I was not interested in school, so therefore I was less engaged. Like, it's not that complicated. But the medical field has treated it as if it's complicated for decades. This whole thing has obviously become something of a pattern in the field of modern medicine. In the last few years, we've learned, or at least those of us who hadn't been paying close attention, learned that the chemical imbalance theory of depression was a lie. Gender-affirming care was a lie. The claims about how lockdowns wouldn't hurt children was a lie. And now ADHD is a lie. At this point, you have to ask yourself, why would you trust the psychiatric industry ever again? They are lying about everything. They are constantly lying. And these are not lies of little consequence. Millions of people, especially children, have been hurt, often permanently. The only winner in this process, as always, has been the pharmaceutical industry, which has convinced millions of parents to buy their drugs and medicalize a completely normal aspect of the human condition. These are all points that some of us have been making for years, even decades. We were shouted down as science deniers, and now we get the inevitable missive in some corporate media outlet unceremoniously announcing that the people they defamed and insulted were actually right all along. That's what this New York Times article amounts to. And I get no pleasure out of it. I find it infuriating. And all you can do going forward is to treat the self-described experts in the field of psychiatry and in the big pharma with maximum contempt and skepticism, especially when they're trying to convince you to drug yourself or your child. Just be prepared for the inevitable backlash that will follow when you don't go along with the next wonder drug they're pushing for you or your children. First, they'll call you a science denier. Then they'll try to censor you on social media. And then many years later, without giving away a dime of the money they've made from their fraud or suffering any consequences whatsoever, they'll tell the New York Times that you were right all along. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. You and your family's dreams matter, and so does protecting them. Secure your family's future with Policy Genius Life Insurance. They make finding coverage simple, giving your loved ones a financial safety net to handle debts, expenses, or even build wealth over time. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Their side-by-side comparison tool shows you quotes from top insurers across America, completely free with no hidden fees. Their licensed experts are with you every step of the way, answering questions, handling paperwork, and advocating for you so you can get the coverage you need and get back to living your life. 40% of people wish they'd gotten life insurance earlier. Get ahead today and give you and your loved ones peace of mind, knowing they'll be financially protected if something happens to you, covering their everyday expenses, mortgage payments, or even college tuition if you're no longer there to provide. Don't just take my word for it. Thousands of satisfied customers have left 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. No matter what stage of life you're in, Policy Genius helps you find the perfect coverage for your specific situation. Secure your families tomorrow so you have peace of mind today. Head to policygenius.com/Walsh or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Walsh. Daily Wire reports the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, and Trump administration officials tore into CNN reporter Caitlin Collins after she asked if there are plans to return to the United States an illegal alien and suspected MS-13 gang member who was recently deported. The exchange came as Trump hosted Bukele in the Oval Office on Monday, with the two discussing immigration and the ongoing agreement between the two nations, which allows the United States to deport criminal illegal aliens to an El Salvadoran prison facility. Collins questioned President Donald Trump on the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, an illegal alien and suspected MS-13 gang member who was deported to El Salvador and is now being held in the country's terrorism confinement center, a massive prison holding tens of thousands of cartel and gang members. And Caitlin Collins was asking about this. And in fact, this clip is pretty entertaining because Trump brings into the conversation, half of his cabinet. The whole Trump administration kind of gangs up to respond to this line of questioning from Caitlin Collins. And let's watch some of that.
He had been illegally in our country, and in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country.
So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States.
I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin. Except for Venezuela, that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple.
So we've got Pam Bondi, Stephen Miller, Marco Rubio, all getting in on the action there. And they're right, of course, about everything they said. The main point here, as Rubio emphasized, is that this guy is a citizen of El Salvador, and he is now back in El Salvador. The idea that an illegal alien should be returned from his home country back into our country is absurd. He's not a citizen here. He's a citizen of the country he's now residing in. And so it's up to El Salvador what they do with him. It's not really our concern. They'll figure it out. He is an El Salvador citizen. I also appreciated this moment from Bukele talking about the just incredible turnaround in his country, that went from one of the most violent and dangerous countries in the world to one of the safest. And he has a line here that I really appreciated. Let's listen to it.
We're very happy, and we're very eager to help. We know that you have a crime problem, a terrorism problem that you need help with. And we're a small country, but if we can help, we will do it. And we actually turned the capital of the world, that was the journalists call it, right? Capital of the world into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. And, sometimes they say that we imprison thousands. I like to say that we actually liberated millions. So,
It's very good. Who gave him that line? Do you think I can use that?
So they say we imprisoned thousands, but we actually liberated millions, is what he said, which is a great line, and it's true. Law and order is liberation. This is what all of the dimwit anarchists in our country get wrong. It's what they don't understand. They don't really understand anything, but they don't understand this, that law is freedom. You cannot have freedom without law, without order, without the enforcement of law. If you think of freedom as the absence of law, as the absence of accountability, as just the ability to do whatever you want, well, then many Central and South American countries today are very free by that, logic. There are a lot of countries in Africa that are free in that sense, in the sense that they are failed states with very little law and order so that you can, commit crimes without fear of being held responsible. Haiti. Haiti is the freest country on earth because there's basically no law. It's a failed state. But would anyone consider Haiti free? I mean, are the people of Haiti enjoying freedom? What about the people of Ethiopia or Somalia? Is that freedom? Well, no, it's not. That's oppression. That's misery. That's not freedom. And that's because the freedom is not actually the ability to just do whatever you want. As Pope John Paul II said, freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. It's the ability to do what you ought. Now, freedom is the ability to do what you should be doing. It's the ability to live a good life. And if you do not have the ability to live a good life, then you do not have freedom. And nobody is living a good life in Haiti. Very few people were living good lives in El Salvador prior to the new regime taking effect. The law should enable and facilitate the good of its citizens. It should enable its citizens to live good lives, to do what they ought. That is freedom. And that's how you have freedom, not by absence of laws, but through the law. And El Salvador is a great example of that. All right, Cory Booker posted a video the other day, and before we get to that, let's just recall something. It was only 2 weeks ago that Booker had the longest filibuster in the history of Congress, speaking for 25 hours straight. And he did all that for no reason, as you remember. He wasn't even trying to block any particular law. He wasn't protesting any particular policy. He just did it purely as a publicity stunt. Well, the great thing is that it was just 2 weeks ago that it happened, and it's like it never happened. Nobody cares. Nobody's talking about it. It made no impact. It didn't even really increase Cory Booker's profile at all. The vibes for Cory Booker have not shifted. Everything is the same. Like, I had to remind you that filibuster happened because you forgot, right? We all forgot. So it was for absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. Nothing was gained. Not even for Cory Booker himself. Not even his own profile and, brand, because politicians have brands now. Not that didn't even change. Nothing changed, which is great. But here's Booker again. He posted this clip from a town hall over the weekend, and he obviously thought that it was very inspirational. Here it is.
I have a question about LGBTQ rights because, as you know, we get attacked like every time a fascist government comes in. They say they're protecting kids, but it's not about the kids. We can't even live our truth because me going out every single day as who I am puts me in danger. So my question, Senator, to you is, what are we going to do about protecting LGBTQ rights and trans rights for those who don't have a voice that can speak up? This is not a costume. This is who I am, and I am not about to let him tell me who I am.
Thank you for coming. So first of all, can I have a hug? Yes. Thank you. So this is what really bothers me about bullies. They often will first target the people they believe and perceive are the weakest. And from Stonewall to Harvey Milk to some of the activists that lead Garden State Pride right now, they make a mistake when it comes to the New Jersey LGBTQ community if they think we're weak. And I will tell you this. I will stand with you. If they come after trans Americans or LGBTQ Americans, they're going to have to come through this United States Senator.
He did say we, didn't he? They make a mistake about the LGBT community if they think that we are weak. I didn't hear that wrong. Now, okay, that's not anything we didn't already know, but it's nice that Cory Booker is finally admitting it. I think that's new. Is that the first time he admitted it? Even that he came out of the closet, didn't he? Didn't that just happen? Again, not a surprise by any stretch of the imagination, and even that, like Cory Booker just came out of the closet and it got no headlines. Nobody cares. No one cares about this guy. It's great. So anyway, the flamboyant gay guy there, not Cory Booker, the other one, he's got lipstick and a wig and it looks like goggles for some reason. Maybe he just came from the pool. I don't know. It looks like he was out snorkeling. He identifies as a scuba diver. He's scuba curious. He's scuba fluid. And anyway, that guy says that when he goes out as himself every day, he's in danger, which is obviously nonsense. As I've outlined so many times, there is no hate crime epidemic against trans people or gay people or any other letter in the LGBT alphabet soup. It's all made up. It's all fake. Actually, if you look at the numbers, you'll see that, for example, the murder rate for trans people is lower than the general population. It's actually safer to be LGBT than it is to be straight. That's what the stats say anyway. And I'm not implying that straight people are getting attacked for being straight. You know, people who speak out against the LGBT community do get attacked and do get threatened. And I know that from experience, at least on the threat part of it, I know from experience. But I'm not saying there's some kind of epidemic of anti-straight hate crimes. All I'm saying is that these hysterical claims of danger faced by LGBT people are nonsensical. There's no evidence of it. It's not grounded in reality. The stats do not bear that out at all. And you know that just based on how these people carry themselves. You know, it's like I was saying this on Friday, I think, about the BLM narrative, that we always hear that, you know, young black men are terrified of the cops, terrified of what will happen during traffic stops and everything else, terrified of driving while black, all this kind of stuff. But then you see the body cam footage of these BLM martyrs, and what you see is the exact opposite of what they claim. You see behavior that shows the exact opposite of fear. You see people going out of their way to turn a low-stakes, non-violent interaction into a life or death struggle. The cops aren't doing that, right? That's the BLM martyrs. That's what they do. And there are a million examples of this. George Floyd, of course, is the most prominent. But, I mean, think back to, remember that video from last year of a woman chasing a cop down a hallway with a knife? The footage looks like something out of a horror movie. And the cop shows up to do a welfare check, and this woman rushes out of the apartment with waving a butcher knife, like a horror film. And you watch that, and this is not someone afraid of the cops. This is someone who is not nearly afraid enough. This is somebody pathologically incapable of experiencing even just normal human levels of trepidation and anxiety. Because that's what would stop you from trying to chase a cop with a knife while he's pointing a gun at you. And, you know, there's a similar thing here with the LGBT people. They say that they're so afraid, they're so terrified, and yet they go out of their way to call attention to themselves. They go out of their way to act as provocatively as possible. In a fascist far-right dictatorship, as this guy claims that we're living in, well, in that kind of country, a man is not going to leave the house in lipstick, a wig, and bedazzled goggles. Okay, that's not what you do. If you're living in a anti-gay fascist dictatorship, you're not going to leave the house looking like that. That's not how people behave when they're in fear. That's like, I mean, that would be like smearing pig's blood on yourself and jumping into the ocean and then flapping around like a wounded seal and then claiming that you're doing that because you're afraid of sharks. No, you're doing all that because apparently you're very confident that there are no sharks. That's the kind of stunt you pull if you're really, really confident that there are no sharks within 100 miles of you. And every pride parade that you see is like this. It's like it's really the LGBT community's triumphant celebration of their own imperviousness. They think they're above any rules or laws or standards of decorum and decency. They're flaunting their protected status in our faces. That's what this is all about. You know, you might say that everything these LGBT activists do is an expression of their lack of fear, or at least their lack of shame. You know, it's more a lack of shame, I suppose, than a lack of fear, but these things are related. They are utterly shameless, and obviously not afraid to broadcast that fact to the world. And, that's not to say that LGBT activists fear nothing. They do fear quite a lot, actually. They fear the truth. They fear reality. They fear any attempt to put any kind of moral standards in place. They fear themselves to a large extent. So they fear a lot, but they definitely do not fear repercussions from the imaginary fascists that they're constantly squealing about. I think that's the point. Let's get to the comment section.
If you're a man, it's required that you grow up being with a sweet baby gang.
Aging creeps into everyday life in ways you hardly notice at first. The mornings take a bit longer. You find yourself needing more recovery time after activities. You start choosing the comfortable shoes without a second thought. I clearly don't age and am still in my prime, but for the rest of you, luckily there's Qualia Life to take the edge off of getting old. Qualia Senolytic is a formula that's been clinically tested to help your body get rid of those pesky senescent cells naturally, so you can age more gracefully. These cells are basically what cause all those annoying aging symptoms that we deal with. The aches and pains, taking forever to bounce back after a workout, and that mental and physical sluggishness that makes you think, is this what being middle-aged really feels like? It helps tackle all of that. Plus, it's not some annoying supplement that you have to remember to take every single day. You only need to take it for 2 days each month, and it helps your body naturally eliminate senescent cells. Plus, made from 9 plant-derived compounds, Qualia keeps each formula vegan, which is really important to me, non-GMO and gluten-free, also important to me. Experience the science of feeling younger. Go to qualialife.com/Walsh for up to 50% off your purchase and use code Walsh for an additional 15% off. That's QUALIA life.com/Walsh for an extra 15% off your purchase. Your older self will thank you. And thanks to Qualia for sponsoring this episode. I liked adolescence because they set it up so that the parents were all good on the surface, but clearly we all know that at the end of the day, they actually are to blame. It's impossible that they're blameless because they're his parents. The heartbreak is so much more powerful than when they tried their best and still fell short. It shows the vast difficulty of being a good parent. But I don't think that's true. I don't think it's difficult to be a good parent. You say the vast difficulty of being a good parent. I don't think it is. It's difficult to be a perfect parent. It's impossible, actually, but it's not difficult to be a good parent. If you love your child, if you care about your child's well-being, if you care about his intellectual and moral formation, if you really put in the effort, if you're really trying your best, as you say, if you actually are, then you're probably a good parent. Not perfect, but good. If you're trying your best, actually trying your best, not just claiming that you are, but actually trying your best, then you are a good parent. Okay, it's incredibly rare that you'll find two parents that are trying their best, right? Two married parents, still married, trying their best, and yet would still qualify as bad parents. You don't encounter that very often. Almost every bad parent, and there are a lot of them out there, they're bad because they aren't really trying. That's basically what we mean by the term bad parent. We mean a parent who doesn't try, a parent who has given up trying or never did try, a parent who is neglectful, whether, in any sense, morally, intellectually, emotionally, physically. And I think this is actually a very harmful misconception. The idea that being a good parent is vastly difficult and that you can actually try your best as a parent and still end up with a child who's in jail for murder by the age of 13 is just not true, or at least it's almost certainly not true. Okay, do a survey of every person under the age of 30 who's currently in prison for a serious crime. What percent of those people do you think had two parents at home who loved their kids and were quote unquote trying their best? What percent of the violent criminals in prison right now, really of any age. So not even at any age. Violent criminals in prison who had 2 loving parents in the home who were sincerely trying their best. Is it even 5%? Can we imagine even 5% of violent criminals with 2 loving parents in the home who were trying their best? I doubt it. I mean, I doubt it's even 5%. So that was my point yesterday, talking about this aspect of this show, Adolescence, when they wanted to make sure this kid had good parents, attentive parents, because they want to send the message that, well, this could happen to anybody. This could be your kid. And that's just, it's almost certainly not true. And it's important that parents understand this, because all that ends up happening is that good parents, loving parents, end up walking around with this anxiety, this almost hysteria, this sense of panic that you make one mistake, you screw up on one thing, you make one bad decision, whatever it may be, that you do that, and next thing you know, your kid's going to be a serial killer. That's this anxiety that parents walk around with, especially these days, all the time. And the whole parenting, all the parenting books and all the so-called parenting experts, and they've all made a killing off of this anxiety, where they're saying, here's the perfect formula for being a good parent. Follow this formula, because if you don't, your kid's life will be destroyed. Right? Even if they don't end up being serial killers, they will end up in therapy for the rest of their lives, complaining about what a screw up you were. And it's just not the reality. And I think that's important for us to understand. Let's see. Matt being a snob about Stephen A. Smith not being able to run for president is super cringe. The vision of the founding fathers was that anyone could hold the office. No, that was not the vision. Whose vision was that exactly? Which founding father expressed this vision that literally anyone could be president? Was that Thomas Jefferson? Yeah, I think it was Thomas Jefferson, right? I think he was the one who said that his greatest dream is that one day a man with no leadership skills and no relevant experience of any kind, whose only professional talent is yelling about basketball, might become the leader of the entire country. Wasn't that? Yeah, that was Thomas Jefferson's vision, wasn't it? The binder bit, it was funny, but Matt, it went on a little too long. Well, yeah, you're talking to the guy who actually sat down and wrote and then delivered a 10-minute monologue complaining about my wife buying goats. So, yeah, it was funny, but it went on too long is basically my whole career. That's, you could describe, that'll be on my gravestone. That's my life. That'll be on my gravestone. It was funny, but it went on too long. Finally, I added Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World to my watch list. That's good, because it's, you should. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I just forced my kids to watch it for like the 3rd time. My 11-year-old daughter boycotted and refused to watch it again, but the rest of the kids watched it, and it's a great film. It's about a British naval ship in the Pacific in 1805, and it's, well, I'm not going to go into it. In fact, I'm going to do a separate video just on this movie. And I think it'll be a video that's entertaining to about 10 people, but it's interesting to me anyway. So we're gonna do that. It is a great film. You could make an argument it's the most underrated film of all time, is Master and Commander. So it's the diametric opposite of The Dark Knight, which is the most overrated film of all time. Becoming a member of Daily Wire Plus isn't just a subscription, it's a statement. It means you're joining millions of Americans who share your values, respect our history, and are committed to building a stronger future. Members get ad-free, uncensored access to our daily shows from the most trusted names in media, in-depth investigative journalism, and entertainment that actually reflects what you believe. Movies, documentaries, and series reshaping the culture in real time. Join now. Head to dailywire.com/subscribe. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. Over 60 years ago, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human being to travel into space. And since that remarkable achievement, hundreds of people from 47 different countries have made the journey into space. Some have spent considerable lengths of time there. 2 astronauts were stranded in space for 9 months and just returned home a few weeks ago, thanks to Elon Musk and SpaceX. 3 or 4 years ago, William Shatner made a brief trip to space at the age of 90. Jeff Bezos has been to space. Michael Strahan has been to space. One of the guys from the Dude Perfect YouTube channel has been to space. Going to space was an incredible achievement 60 years ago, and now it's something that a YouTuber can do. Now, there are still, of course, many mind-boggling achievements to be had in space. There's an infinite number, in fact. Lots and lots and lots of history can still be made in space, but if you want to make it, you'll have to do something a little bit more than a suborbital flight at the edge of space, because literally hundreds of people have already done that and more. The next truly historic achievement in space will have to occur somewhere past the moon. Anywhere past the moon, as no human being has ever been that far. At least that's what I thought. I thought that when you have a 90-year-old William Shatner taking a tourist trip into orbit, it just isn't possible anymore for anyone to make history by also taking a tourist trip into orbit. But apparently I was wrong. Because yesterday, 6 celebrity women, including Gayle King, Katy Perry, and Lauren Sanchez, who is the plastic fiance of Jeff Bezos, took a Blue Origin rocket into space on a trip that lasted from takeoff to touchdown less than 12 minutes in total. Now, it was no doubt a cool experience for those women. It's an experience that I would love to have. Not one I'd want to have with those women, but one I'd like to have in general. I'm sure it was a lot of fun. But according to the media, it was more than just fun. It was somehow, some way, historic. Headlines across the corporate media trumpeted the news. Vanity Fair declared, Lauren Sanchez, Katy Perry, Gayle King, and their historic all-women's space flight land safely. People reported, Katy Perry, Gayle King, and Lauren Sanchez go to space and back in historic all-female Blue Origin flight. NPR says Katy Perry, Gayle King, and others reflect on their brief but historic trip to space. Space.com. Katy Perry and Gayle King launched to space with 4 others on historic all-female Blue Origin rocket flight. And many other headlines used this language. The mainstream media was on hand covering the whole ordeal like it was a major newsworthy event. All of the corporate media outlets had reporters and anchors on the ground. The Associated Press was especially excited. Watch.
The vibe of the New Shepard crew this morning, now that the morning is finally here?
Oh, there is so much energy here. In fact, I've already heard happy screams coming from inside the astronaut training center. And these women are feeling all the feels, right? This is a very human emotion to feel energy, excitement, a dash of anxiety as you kind of teeter on the edge of history. But these women are all rock stars in their own field.
Now, needless to say, any reporter who uses the phrase feeling all the feels should immediately and permanently lose their press credentials and their right to vote and their citizenship. But lots of other people in the media were embarrassing themselves during this ordeal. Oprah Winfrey actually wept as she watched the all-female team launch into space for a trip that would last for approximately half the length of an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. And there she is crying there. Just such a historic moment. Katy Perry, one of the women on this crew, was particularly dramatic. Before the flight, she bragged about the historical journey that she was about to undergo. Listen.
Hi, guys. It's 1 hour and 5 minutes till we launch. We are the Taking Up Space crew. There's 6 of us, all women. It's a historical flight to space because it's the first time that all women have been in space. And I'm so excited for this launch. I have never felt this much love like I have felt today. I feel like my message that I'm getting is you never know the amount of love that you have inside of you until the day you launch. And I'm feeling that love. I'm sending you love. Please come check it out on blueorigin.com/live. Watch us go up. Watch us land safely. And for my kitty cats, I have a special reveal coming to you.
All right, okay, shut up, Katy. So that was not terribly eloquent, but at least it was better than what she said in an interview with Elle magazine a few days earlier. Quoting her directly, this is what she said. Quote, "Space is going to finally be glam. Let me tell you something. If I could take glam up with me, I would do that. We're going to put the ass in astronaut." Yes, we're going to put the ass in astronaut. So we went from one small step for man to putting the ass in astronaut in the span of just a couple of generations. Katy Perry, in other words, had certainly set the bar high for herself. She was so insufferably stupid and ditzy before the flight that everybody wondered if she could come up with anything even dumber when she landed. And fortunately, she delivered. The brief exposure to radiation had plunged her IQ down to Arctic levels, enabling her to come up with this gem after she landed. Listen.
It is the highest high, and it is surrender to the unknown, trust, and this whole journey is not just about going to space. It's the training, it's the team, it's the whole thing. I couldn't recommend this experience more. This is like up there with all the, different tools that I've learned in my life, from meditation to the Hoffman process. This is up there because what you're doing is you're like really finding the love for yourself, because you got to trust in yourself on this journey. And then you're feeling the love when you come down, for sure. And you're feeling that strength. So I feel really connected to that strong, divine feminine right now.
By the way, you're such a badass. I love that the month of April, you're like, I'm going to space and I'm launching my tour.
Sir Edmund Hillary, sometime after becoming the first person to climb Mount Everest in 1953, is reported to have said, "It is not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves." And his point was that achieving any great thing requires us to subordinate ourselves and overcome our own weakness and our own frailty. Now compare that to the quote just offered by great explorer Katy Perry, who says, quote, "You're like really feeling the love for yourself because you got to trust in yourself on this journey." So Edmund Hillary found that achieving something great required the subordination of the self. Katy Perry found that it requires an even more intense focus on and worship of the self, along with the divine feminine, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. Now, it makes sense that Katy Perry came to this sort of opposite conclusion after her historic accomplishment, mainly because there was no historic accomplishment. She did not accomplish anything at all, and neither did anyone else on the all-female crew. A crew that was not really a crew any more than I'm part of the crew when I take an American Airlines flight from Nashville to DC. Okay, they were passengers on a tourist trip. They weren't even the first tourists to go on this trip. They missed the chance to be the first tourists in space by about 25 years, as the first space tourism flight happened in the spring of 2001. So nothing historic happened here at all. They were not the first female astronauts because they aren't astronauts. And women have been going into space since the 1960s. In fact, get this, this wasn't even actually the first all-female space crew. That happened not in 2025, but in 1963, when Valentina Tereshkova took a solo trip into space where she orbited the Earth 48 times. It was an all-female flight crew. So even if you're inclined to give a woman credit for being a pioneer because she's the first woman to do something that men have already done a bunch of times, this still would not even come close to qualifying. This is like celebrating a random, female Delta pilot as if she's Amelia Earhart. Never mind that Amelia Earhart is one of the most overrated historical figures of all time. Not a great aviator, not even the best female aviator of her time. Only reason anyone remembers her name is because she crashed into the Pacific, which is hardly an achievement. But in any case, however historical Amelia Earhart was or wasn't, these women are not historic figures at all. In reality, these are a bunch of rich ladies who got to take a sightseeing tour on a rocket because their friend's boyfriend is Jeff Bezos. So in the pantheon of female heroes, Katy Perry is not exactly Joan of Arc. In terms of historic significance, this trip is about as monumental as like being the 100th customer to ride the Batman roller coaster at Six Flags on a random Saturday. Historians will look back on this journey the way they look back on your Uncle Jim's trip to the Grand Canyon last August. All that said, again, I have no doubt that it was a cool experience. It was not historic or significant in any way, but it was still, I'm sure, cool. More than cool, it must have been profound and quite moving. It's a shame then that it was wasted on a woman with the wisdom and intellectual depth of a newborn poodle. And that is why all of the media outlets claiming that Katy Perry's trip into space was historic and Katy Perry herself are all today canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
John Bickley here, Daily Wire Editor-in-Chief. Wake up every morning with our show, Morning Wire, where we bring you all the news that you need to know in 15 minutes or less. Join me and my co-host Georgia Howe for daily coverage of all the biggest stories on Morning Wire.